So obviously we've got Mark talking today. Just going to do a little bit of introduction. So as always, obviously this is the Power Platform Finance User Group, obviously community for finance and IT professionals about leveraging the Power Platform. So all across there. We haven't actually got Power Virtual Agents on here as the logo yet. We've changed those logos around, but I'm sure we'll get around to doing that. Okay, so you've got me. I'm Chris Barber. I work at Altius and I'm a senior consultant there. I work with Rishi. Rishi, I don't know if you want to say hello briefly.
Yep, hi there. Yep. So Rishi. So I kind of set this up last year a little bit to do some face-to-face events, and then this year we've been running fortnightly webinars. So I also work with at Altius, or now we're actually Avanade. So we need to get into the habit of talking to ourselves about Avanade. Working there with work with Power BI a lot, working with a lot of big clients, especially on the kind of governance, self-serve analytics. That's kind of my key area at the moment, which also Chris does a lot of as well. So that's kind of where I'm looking to focus a bit more as well. And maybe with the community stuff, I'm really interested in how that applies in finance, because I think there's a massive market for that, and there's also just it's an area that could really benefit, I think, from Power BI and Power Platform more broadly. So really keen to explore that more broadly.
Naveen, do you want to say hello?
Hi there, everybody. Well, my name is Naveen. I work with Rishi and Chris, mainly with Rishi on another project, Learn Data Insights, where we have a lot of interesting stuff on Power BI, Python, and some Excel as well. And well, nice to be here, and thank you all for joining. By the way, did we mention, maybe I didn't hear it correctly, but did we mention that this session is recorded?
Yeah, Rishi mentioned it at the beginning.
Oh, sorry about that.
Okay. No worries. Okay, so we talked about this a little bit before, but obviously there's a new recording up on the site about modelling cash flows. Actually, Bob Duffy is really interesting. And Rishi did mention it's not just cash flows, so he does go through the whole P&L and balance sheet and how it links together. So definitely check that recording out if you get a chance. Any feedback will obviously be appreciated. I'll put it in the chat as we get going, and obviously we can feed that back to Mark as well, so he's got some feedback from the session. And just to let you know about the next session that's upcoming, so we've got Imke, who's coming to speak next time round. That'll be the number 17 on the 10th of December. So hopefully you can join us then. So Imke is obviously an MVP working as a finance director, so obviously neatly ties in with what we've got here. Okay, so that's me all done. So I'm going to hand over to Mark, who's going to take us through his session. So Mark, obviously, very sort of prominent in the community, runs a very large user group for over 6 years. Microsoft MVP, an exceptional talker. So yeah, really excited to have him on, and I'll hand it to Mark.
Lovely. Okay, I just needed to come out and come in again.
Cool, thanks.
Okay, so what I was saying is that I was originally going to present a whole gamut of techniques, but of course, when you get into writing it, you find that there's so much interesting stuff that it's nicer just to concentrate on one. And today I'm going to concentrate it on nearest neighbours, and unless I make a mess of it, maybe I can inveigle you to kind of talk about the other one sometime in 2021. So let's have a look at the nearest neighbours, and I'm going to share something with you. So let's go to my start here. You can see my Power BI file. Tell me that you can. Can you see it?
Yes, I can see it.
Oh, goodness. Okay, good, lovely. What we've got here is we've got 4 tables. We've got our home builders. We have got 5 companies in the FTSE 100, Barratt's, Barclay, Ferguson, Persimmon, Taylor Wimpey, and they are all home builders. They're in that sector. They've also got a ticker each. And here, that's if you want to go and buy shares in them, that's the ticket that you need. It's also going to be useful for us because it's the column that links the table. Then we've got some data about them. We've got we typically I've just put, of course, the minimal amount of information data that we can use to show the issue, but typically we have hundreds of different indicators. I worked for a brewery, had 300 all about beers a barrel and sizes of bottles and things like that, and leakage. But I've just put 2 here: return and risk. Return is the how much money we're going to get back, and risk is how much volatility there is, how much we could possibly lose. So return is good, more return is good, more risk is bad. But just an example of a couple of indicators. So 5 companies, 2 indicators, and what we've got is we've got the facts down here about those. So I've got 10 rows of facts. I've got the risk and return of each of these companies. And apart from the company names and the company tickers, everything else is completely fictional. So what do I want to do? The first thing I want to do is I want to look and compare each of these companies directly. I want to look at the risk and return of Barrett's compared to each other individuals. But often what we get, and we'll do that straight away, but often what we get here is that we also want to compare it to its nearest neighbours. And for example, we might have Barrett's, we might have decided for various reasons that its 2 nearest neighbours here are Berkeley and Ferguson. And we'd like to know the risk of Barrett against the average of the risk of its nearest neighbours. Notice that this is not grouping. So for example, Barrett has a nearest neighbour of Berkeley, but Berkeley doesn't have a nearest neighbour of Barrett. So if you know your geography of North England, think about Hull, right on a limb in East Yorkshire, has a nearest neighbour big city of Leeds. But Leeds is not the nearest neighbour to Hull. It's probably the nearest neighbour to Bradford, which is 10 miles the other side of it. So that's why you can have, so it's not just grouping. We have got different companies have different nearest neighbours, and that's what makes it interesting. If we wanted grouping, like I've got this region here to show how simple it is. So what we're going to do is we are going to get started. And there's some numbers I want you to keep in mind. Here's a worked example, this Excel. Can you see the Excel? Say yes, please.
Yes, I can.
Lovely, fantastic. Okay, let's think. Here's some numbers that we're going to keep in mind. And it tells us if things are working or not working. We're looking at Barrett's, ticker BDEV, and it's got Berkeley and Ferg as its nearest neighbour. Barrett's, I've just copied the return. The risk is 15%, the return is 10%. Berkeley and Ferguson, the corresponding values are here. And if we average them out, their nearest neighbour, so value would be 14.5% risk and 13 for return. So if we see 15 and 10 for risk and return, we know we're looking at the direct values. If we see 14.5 and 13, we're looking at the nearest neighbour values. So again, this is how we calculate the nearest neighbours. We take all the neighbours, of which we've got 2, and we just take the average of that value. So we could say that Barrett's is doing better, slightly better than its nearest neighbours in terms of risk, actually slightly worse because more risk is bad. 15 compared to 14.5, and its return is much worse than its nearest neighbours, which again is bad. So because 10 compared to 13%. So these are the numbers to remember: 15 and 10 direct, 14 and 13 at nearest neighbours. Let's get started and build something. And what we're going to do is we are going to build a simple matrix. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the value from my fact, and I'm going to put it in the values field here, and I'm going to put it against my indicator code on my columns and my home builder. I'm going to look at that against the company. And all of a sudden, something's gone very wrong. And the reason is, if you click on see details, basically we've got no relationship. So let's go and put in a relationship. And what I'm going to do, come into my modeling pane, I'm going to say, of course, I'm going to connect my home builder to my fact on my ticker. And there we put the relationship in. Eventually it will come. There we go. And I'm going to click on, I'm going to do the same for my indicators. So my home builder and my indicator are my 2-dimension table, my facts. The clues in the name is my fact table. What I'm going to do as well, I'm just going to hide these 2 fields in the fact table, standard stuff, because we've already got them in the dimension tables. And now if I have a look at my measure, well, we've got something interesting going on. First of all, what we've got is, if we have a look at our return and risk values here, look fine, but our totals don't. First of all, what we've got is we've got adding the totals here. So, and what we want to do is to average them. The second thing is that these totals here, we can't really add a dollop of risk and a dollop of return, and it's not meaningful to add in these column totals here. We can't add them. So let's fix that. What we're going to do is we're going to create, and I've got this calculations table where I'm going to stick in my measures. We are going to create a new measure. And for various reasons, I'm going to call it default value. Let me make that a bit bigger. And I'm going to call it default value. And I'm going to say that it is simply the average of my fact value. And Rishi, when you notice me doing something wrong, shout out rather than watch me struggle. So we've got default value there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come along and I'm going to say, actually, I don't want my value. I'm going to use the explicit measure, not the implicit measure, and put that on there. And what we'll do as well is we'll come to default value and make it a percentage format, and we only really care about 1 decimal place. So there we go. So that's good. If we have a look at our row totals down here, 12.1 and 14%, that's the average risk and return across. That's a reasonable number. But those column totals, again, don't mean anything. Even though we've averaged them, but they don't mean anything. So let's just improve our measure. And what we will say is, well, if I can come along here and shift return, well, I'm going to say basically if the has one value, so we're not has one filter, has one value, and that's our indicator. So we're only one indicator is useful. I'm going to put a comma there. Then we can average it. If not, by default, it's going to return a blank. So if we have a look at that, let's have a look. Oh, that's not what we wanted. That's not what we wanted at all. Default value. Let's have a quick look. And what have I done wrong there? Because I wanted to see the numbers, but not the totals. So let's have a quick look. Oh, I've done it the wrong way around, probably. So let's have a look. Let's click on that. If has one value, indicator code fact value. Does that look right to me? It does look right. It does look right. To do is I am going to come back and I'm going to say, I'm just going to create a new default value, and I'll do that. I'll create a new measure, and I'm just going to say default value equals average of the fact value. There we go. And I'll use that one. And what I can do, there's a tiny thing at the end, but I can show you the rehearsal one. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take default value and stick it in there. Default value is working. It's got those totals, and we'll leave default value to later on. And okay, that's good. And of course, with default value, I want to make it a percent to one significant figure. Good. Okay, that's good. And just to prove the point as well, I'm not sure that if we wanted to do just grouping, what I could do is to just bring up region rather than company, and that's grouping. That's not what we're not doing, but grouping is simple. We could leave it now, but we're doing nearest neighbours. So I'll go back and I'll put my company in there. Good. Okay, lovely. Okay, so we've got our direct values and a bit more besides, but what I want to do is get those nearest neighbour values. So let's do that. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say, to get my nearest neighbour values, I know that I'm going to have to use my mapping. The table I didn't explain is this one, and basically it maps a ticker to its nearest neighbour. So it says that, for example, Barrett's BDev has Barclays and Ferguson. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come along and say, actually, I don't want that one. I've done it all wrong. I'm going to delete that relationship. Yes, I am. And I'm going to say, I want this lovely relationship with my mapping table. So I'll go ticker to home ticker. There, good. And yeah, that's right. And if I come along, I can click on Barrett and we can see it working, because as I click on Ferguson, I see its nearest neighbours. If I click on Taylor Wimpey, that's good. And then I can say, Okay, so now what I can do is I can have a relationship between my nearest neighbor map, my map, and my ticker. So I'm going to go nearest neighbor ticker all the way down here. And it gives me this yellow legal warning saying this relationship has many-to-many cardinality. And it says, do not use unless you understand the significantly different behavior of many relationships. Well, I don't understand it, but willy-nilly, I'm going to go in and I'm going to click on OK and throw caution to the wind. And I've got this bi-directional many-to-many relationship. We'll talk about it later on, but if I have a look at my home builders now, let's go to my here. If I look at Barrett developments, I'm no longer getting 10 and 15. I'm getting the right numbers. So that's good. Do we end here? Do we finish off here? Well, not really, because basically we've got away with it this time because our data is small and absolutely perfect. But we really don't know what it's doing, and we really can't see what it's doing if it goes wrong, if we start getting indicators in here or home builders in our fact table that are not in our main table, or mappings in our nearest neighbor table. Very hard to understand what's going on. So what we'll do is we'll try and build explicitly what we think this many-to-many is doing. So I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to go back. And what I'll do is I'll just go back and click on my ticker and put it on there. And then my direct route is still working, at least. Let me just go back and have a look at that. And now we've got 10 and 15 rod. So we're back with our direct numbers. Good. OK, so what that many-to-many was doing was creating this invisible table of home builders there and doing a join between both of them. So let's do that ourselves. I'm going to go into transform data. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a copy of my home builder table. I'm just going to do that quickly by saying reference. And actually, I really just need the ticker table. So I'm just going to click on ticker. So that's just a copy of the table. And I'm going to call it my neighbor home builder, like that. Good. OK, we've got that. What I'm going to do, I'm going to close and apply. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to see that table in my model. And I'm going to just save my start here just in case things go wrong. And then it's giving us this really ugly relationship here, which we don't want. I'm just going to take this out and put that down there. It's not. And so I'm going to get rid of this relationship. We certainly don't want that relationship. I'm going to delete that relationship. Good. So I've got my neighbor home builder. And what I will do is I'll come to my data and I'm going to put it on here. I'm going to create myself a new visual table. Click on that, create a new visual table. Lovely. And what I'll do, here's my home builder, neighbor home builder. I'll stick it on there. And what I'll do as well, I'll just give it, because it's make it nice, I'll just give it a format the painter. I'll stick it on there. There we are. And I'll give it a title so we remember what it is. Otherwise, neighbor home builder. That's that. OK, good. So what we want to do is we want to come along and we want to join these up. So we've joined. So if I do this and join from my nearest neighbor ticker on my map to my ticker on my neighbor home builder, and I come along and I look at and I click on Barrett, well, I see that it's filtering the neighbor map. I can see Berkeley and Ferguson, but still my nearest neighbor isn't filtered. And that's because what I've done is the relationship can't go this way from many to one. We've got a one-directional relationship going from the home builder to the map, but not the other way. So what I'm going to do is going to come along to properties. And I am going to say, actually, I want this in the filter direction to go both ways. And I'm going to have a quick look and see if that solved my problem. So if I click on Barclays, we see filtered in the nearest neighbour map, and we see the two nearest neighbours of Barclays in our neighbour table, which is great. But the problem is that we put in a bidirectional relationship, and this is a bad thing to do. We can never look somebody like Alberto Ferrari in the face, because he always tells us that these are a very bad thing and that we should use them as a last resort. So remembering that, we're not very happy with it, but we put this this bidirectional relationship in. And so, okay, now I just need to complete the circle, almost literally, and I'm just going to go and click on ticker to ticker. And now I've got this lovely circle, if I do Control-2, that goes all the way from region to neighbor, goes from neighbor to home builder, and goes from home builder into fact. So that should work. And let's have a look at my model. And I'm going to look at my thing, and it's still got the direct numbers there. I was hoping it would get the nearest neighbor numbers. And if I scratch my head and look at it, I'm sure, does anybody want to tell me why it's not working?
It's actually an ambiguous model, isn't it? But
it isn't.
Sorry, it isn't.
It is an ambiguous model.
Yeah, it is ambiguous. Yeah, and it's taking the most direct route rather than warning.
Yes.
Which is something it shouldn't do. It should come up with an error. I think it used to come up with an error.
I think it used to come up with an error too, and this is why I sent an email to the Microsoft project managers, and they said, well, you can have them now, and it's got a set of precedences. And because this is the most direct, and because this is a bidirectional in it, well, it's going to take that route. But ambiguous relationship, we don't want. It sounds like a bad thing in whatever context, and it probably is. So we really don't want it. So last time, what I did before last time was delete this. I'm just going to come along and I'm just going to make this relationship here inactive, which means now hopefully we have got an unambiguous relationship, because it should go all the way from home builder to neighbor map, from neighbor map to neighbor home builder, and then into fact. And if we have a look at it, we see that Barrett's has got 13 and 14.5. So those are our nearest neighbor values, which is good. But we have solved one problem and we've given ourselves another problem, because we've got our nearest neighbor values, but we've lost our direct values. Well, let's just get them back. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to my calculations table. I wonder if it's something to do about putting it in the calculations table. I'm not sure. Go to our calculations table, and I'm going to create a new measure, and I'm going to call it the direct value. I really hope this works. And I'm going to say that it is, I'm going to use calculate because I'm going to change the filter context. So I'm going to say what I want to do is calculate default value, but I want to use the relationship, this inactive relationship between our home builder ticker and our fact ticker. If I do that, we'll have a look. I've created direct value. Let's close it down. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag direct value onto here with default value. And we can see when, especially when I make direct value a percentage. And I'm going to make it 1. We can set, we've got a direct, for the Barrett's, we've got direct value of 10. That's great. And 15 for the risk and return. Actually, I think of those. And we've still got our default values of 13 and 14.5. Those are our nearest neighbor values. So we have done it. Can we finish early? Not quite, because we have that niggling little problem that we've bodged the job by putting in this no longer ambiguous, but this bidirectional relationship. And how are we going to get around that? Well, there is a very nice DAX function called TREATAS, and TREATAS is incredibly useful. And what TREATAS allows us to do is come along, and if I bring data, we can say treat the selected values in this column, and they can see here as I selected Barclays, it's giving Ferguson and Persimmon. Treat the selected values in this column as if they were applying to this ticker here. So let's go ahead and do that and see what we get to. So I'm going to go to here. I'm going to create a new measure, and I'm going to call it somewhat unimaginatively my TREATAS value. What I'm going to say is I'm going to calculate again. I'm going to calculate my default value, and I know what you're thinking. You're thinking the default value is the value we want anyway, but I'm going to fix that. And what I'm going to say treat as, and I'm going to treat the values, that the values gives me the selected values in the, if I clear the map, that's my nearest neighbor column. That'll give the, if I'm selecting one home builder, it'll give me the 2 nearest neighbors. And what I'm going to say is treat those as if they were the fact this applying to this column. Because they're applying to that column, then they're going to naturally filter the corresponding values in the value column. So that's what I'm saying. There's a new measure called TREATAS value, and it's taking the default value and it's applying it. Let's have a look at that. So got that, that's got it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to, for the moment, just because those totals are annoying me, I'm going to come along and I'm just going to get rid of those totals simply by the subterfuge of column subtotals off, of hiding them. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my TREATAS value onto here. Again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it a percentage with 1 decimal place. Let's have a look. And what I'll do as well, if I come over here, I've got my default value, and I'll put my TREATAS value next to my default value. So we can see that the TREATAS value is working, or maybe it's not working because the default value is that number. So to prove that it's working, what I'm going to do, I'm going to save my, before I do such drastic surgery, I'm going to save my home builders file, but I'm going to come along and I'm going to get rid, I'm going to delete this neighbor from the model. And when we delete that, we'll delete the 2 relationships with it. So now we've got no relationship between our map and our fact table. And let's have a look what's happened. Well, if we first of all, let's have a look at our data. This table, we can see that this was our table, it's disappeared. Let's get rid of that visual. Let's come and have a look at our tests. And what we can see is the default value has some funny number. It's the same. It's completely wrong now because that was that just isn't working. But because we've got no relationship between value and if I remind you, we've only got this inactive relationship, and I've switched active off. So default value is there's no filter there. It's just giving us the average value over there. If I come over here, but the TREATAS value is actually giving us the nearest neighbor value, which is great. And that's good. Good. So that's what I wanted to show. What we've got is we've solved this problem, and we've solved it pretty neatly with the help of this TREATAS function. Now, Rishi, Chris, tell me exactly how much I committed the cardinal sin of any speaker and didn't ask how much time I had to finish. So tell me if I'm out of time, which we can stop here because I've done, the rest is just a bit of a kind of a small coda to it. Or do you want me to stop now, or do I have another 5 minutes or so?
You have another up to 15-20 minutes if you want.
Lovely.
So,
okay.
And we can also leave some time at the end for questions, however you want to do it.
Great. So I'll spend about 5 or 10 minutes more just we've created those, but they're not particularly useful yet. So we'll make them a bit useful. And then if we have any problems because of this default value not behaving itself, then I'll quickly go to my rehearsal. In fact, what I'll do is I'll actually go to my rehearsal right now, because let's have a look here. Right. So I've switched over to one I made before, but the one I made before has the default value. And this default value, you can see it's exactly the same, but it seems to be working for some strange reason. It's almost as if it's reversed, isn't it? Don't know. Anyway, we've as soon within 2 minutes of looking at that, when this conversation finishes, I will spot the mistake that we made.
It might be, did you put the right indicator value? So it was from the dimension table in both your table and in your thing, rather in your formula, rather than referring.
Well done, Rishi. Well done,
It
Rishi.
wasn't me. It might be that Fernando's.
I think it is. I think it is. So let's just have a look and prove that you are right there. Let's have a look. Let's go and let's have a look at default value 2. And I have.
That's indicator code. And then just what's on the matrix? Is that from the fact table or from the dimension table?
Well done. Well done again. So nothing wrong with that, but yes. So let's have a quick look at our matrix, and I've got the indicator code. Let's have a look. I've got the indicator code. Well, let's just take it off.
No, it's not coming from the fact. It's coming.
Yes, it's not coming from the fact table. So well spotted. Who was it?
I think Fernando came up with that one.
Fernando, thank you very much. So now it's done. Now it is working fine. Great, lovely, well done. It's good to go. Solution. Thank you very much indeed. Right, let me just go back to my rehearsal one, because I've done exactly the same. I've created the default value, the direct value, and obviously the default value is working, but our matrix wasn't, and our TREATAS value. So we're at exactly the same state. And then all I'm doing is saving a bit of time, because then I'm creating a few measures. I'm creating, and let's have a look at our risks. So what I've done here, and save me typing them out, I'm just saying what I'm creating my direct risk, and I've called it risk direct simply so that it's in alphabetic, it's next to all the other risks. And I'm basically saying calculate the direct value where the indicator is risk. That's going to give me my risk values. I don't have to filter on it. Likewise, I've got my risk nearest neighbor. And what that's doing is using the TREATAS value. Nothing special here, okay? Where the indicator code is risk. And then I've calculated one called risk premium. And this premium is basically, it's going to tell us the difference between the direct value and the nearest neighbor value if we're doing better or worse than our nearest neighbors. It's a premium. Now, the risk premium is bad because more risk is generally not good, but the return premium is good. So what we're going to do here is we're going to come along to our matrix, and we are going to come along and we're going to put our risk premium onto our columns like this. And I'll put the return premium as well. And what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to make this style slightly nicer for our bars. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to put on a couple of conditional formatting onto my risk premium with my data bars. I've got them twice, of course, never mind. That's fine, because I've done them. Doesn't matter, twice is twice as good. And I'm just going to say advanced controls. And when that eventually comes up, I'm going to say risk is, I want a positive bar to be red because risk is bad, and a negative bar is blue. That's good. So there we've got our risk premium. I'm going to do the same with our return premium. I'm going to say that in this case, data bars for return, a positive bar is good. We like a bit more return on our investments, but a negative bar is bad. And there we are. We've got that return. And what I'll do is put that up. Just come here. I'll get rid of the. There we go. Okay, we've got risk and return. And that's because I've got full risk and return. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just take that indicator code off. And what I've got is I've got my risk premium, my reward premium. Let me just take those off. And what we can see is this now helps us. We can see that maybe Ferguson is best. It's blue on both risk and return, which is what we want. Barrett Developments, as we kind of saw at the beginning, is slightly riskier, but certainly doesn't return anything like as much as it should by comparison with its nearest neighbours. So that's what I wanted to show today, basically. And it's an interesting problem, and I've seen this problem. It turns up in investment management quite a lot. We're always interested in how our share is doing against its peers. Lots of government is rating organisation, local authorities and such against their peers as well. And so this is a useful calculation to have. And even though I've just done it with 10 rows, 2 indicators, 5 companies, if we had 300 companies, if we had 500 indicators, it would work just as well. So with that, I will open to questions.
Great stuff. Just while everybody's thinking of questions, Mark, do you mind if I start with one?
Absolutely.
Are there any sort of performance implications of using TREATAS over using the direct relationships themselves?
Well, I heard from, hopefully not, because if you ever look at the DAX created by Power BI, it uses TREATAS all over the place. And in fact, I was watching Alberto Ferrari talk about TREATAS the other day, and he said it's really well optimized. It's a really good function to do from a performance point of view. So the answer is no, I think. I think you can use TREATAS and not worry about it. Obviously, there's the general rule that virtual relationships, which we've created with our TREATAS value, that's what's called a virtual relationship, are generally not as fast as physical relationships. But I think the benefit that we get from making a simpler, more understanding data model and not having that bi-directional thing in, which when we kind of expand our model might create all sorts of complications, is worth any small performance hit we take.
Great stuff, thank you. Are there any other questions for Mark at all? Either put them in the chat or feel free to come off mute and ask away.
Is this something that people have seen before? Is it something that people have used at all?
I've seen TREATAS used before when you want to change the measure used in the graph by clicking on a slicer.
Yep.
So, yeah, exactly, to change average for total.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
And TREATAS is used as well if you've got budgets and actuals, and you've got your budgets at monthly and at category level. You've got your actuals at daily and product level. Well, you can create the relationships. You know, you can have a month table joining your date table. And you can have, you know, you can build it in a model, but you can get around that by using TREATAS as well to compare your budgets to your actuals. That's another reason for it. And as I say, Power BI is doing it all the time when it wants to take a filter from one visual and apply it to another. It's using TREATAS.
Yeah, seen it used in things like, say you had a measure for planned and actual, and you want to be able to compare the two. So essentially, rather than having, you could have two relationships. You could have two dimensions. So the ways to deal with multiple dates, right? So say you have planned and actual dates. The ways to deal with that is you could have two separate date tables. But the problem with that is then you wouldn't really be able to compare them on the same axes because you can only have one date. The date axis has to come from one of the date tables. Or the other approach, as Mark kind of showed before, is to have one inactive relationship and one active, and then use relationship in the measure to activate it on demand. Yeah. Or the third way is to actually have no relationships, and then use TREATAS in both of the formulas to be, say, planned is TREATAS the date as the planned date, and actual TREATAS the date as the actual date, and then that would work as well. So you know, it's quite a neat solution for that as well.
Yeah. Good. Well, thank you for that. What I will do is I will put a link on a OneDrive to the finished working one, and you can just pick it up, because what I've done is, if we have a look at, I've created the data all internally. So when you want to have a look at this, you don't need to repoint it at some external file. If we have a look at any of these files, what I've done is just used enter data just to stick it in there. So if you pick it up, it will work perfectly. No need to connect. So you can pick it up and have a look at what I've done. And I'll send that link so that everybody's got it.
Great, thanks, Mark. Yeah,
great.
We'll put it out on the PPF website and stuff as well.
Good, great.
Nice one, Mark. This enter data thing's become my new best friend as well.
Yes.
What's the limit that you can put in number of rows? There is a limit. I just can't remember what it is. The number of rows and stuff you can enter and enter data.
I don't know.
It's not based on rows. It's based on the combination of rows and columns.
Right.
I can't remember what the limit is.
Values. Yeah.
But, I've hit it before, so obviously been doing some bad practice at some point.
Yes, absolutely. When you hit it, you shouldn't be hitting it anyway, because clearly you're doing something wrong. It's very useful for demos and for really small lookup tables, temporary lookup tables, but you don't want
It's not going to make your Power BI data model a data warehouse.
No, it's not. It's not quite. Good.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Mark.
Pleasure.
Put them on. It's incredible to have Mark on.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Pleasure.
Great. Okay, thanks everyone, and look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks' time with IMCA. So please register for that event. And as I said before, if there's anyone's got any ideas and examples of things that we could look at for next year, please let me know, and we'll try and incorporate it and get you more involved in it as well. So that's also what we're looking for, a bit more engagement from the community, because I think the community is great here. There's so many people with so many great examples and so many people working on different things that I think would be really good to have a look at. But yeah, thanks everyone, and we'll see you in 2 weeks' time.
Okay, take care.
Stay safe.
Thanks,
stay healthy.
everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.